What's going on, guys, and welcome back to Split Screen D&D, the show where we are attacking all things Dungeons and Dragons from both sides of the screen. My name's Tom Quinn, resident Dungeon Master here at Modern Myth.
And I'm Josh Winans, resident player character here at Modern Myth.
And we've got a very special episode today. We've mentioned on a number of other episodes how eager we were to start seeing engagement in the comments, to start engaging with all you beautiful people out there. And this episode actually comes per request of one such commenter. So this one goes out to Aurora101. Thank you so much. Inquired about lore in the world.
Ooh, such a good topic to talk
Great
about.
topic. Actually, I'm sure this is something we would have found our way to, no doubt. But I'm glad that we kind of had our hand was forced on the matter, and I'm stoked for it.
No, 100%. I'm 100% down for this. And for those who are like, oh, you can do that? Yes. Please comment down below and bring up subjects you want to hear us talk about. I mean, we just like talking D&D, so please engage with us.
Yeah, we'd love to see more of it in the comments. Without further ado, I think I think we can just dive right into.
And such a big topic. This is. So.
It is. It's a massive topic. I think one of the great things about lore is that effectively it encompasses everything you have in your game world, and there's a certain importance to that scale of lore. There's also, like, you could have lore that is a blade of grass in its scale, and it's of equal importance in some cases. That one clue to this broader mystery that's maybe unfolding in the game. So there's some really cool stuff with lore. I think a really good place to start, just because it is kind of, for us anyways, the beginning, is let's talk briefly about fundamentally, I think lore is, for the world anyways, is existing primarily in the DM sphere. We're doing our best to inject exciting and meaningful lore into the world. But when you're starting a campaign out, you have a unique opportunity, both as a player and as a DM, and this is different for every table, but certainly at our table, to kind of collaboratively weave player lore into your broader world. So I think I want to kind of pass it to you right out of the gate. And, talk with me a little bit, I guess, about like player lore versus kind of DM injected lore. Talk with me a little bit about that.
Well, when I said to get into like the backstory of my character, which turned into lore, because I'm the mechanically based character, I of course started with the mechanics, and then I built up lore to support the mechanics.
Right.
But what is interesting is you do have I won't say control, because I mean, you should be working with your DM to make sure that your themes, like, I wasn't a clown college graduate whose primary weapon was silly shoes. Like, I needed to fit the tone and character of your story. But really, for the player character side to get going on that, is one, I find it really beneficial to know some of the lore of D&D 5e to begin with.
Rules as written lore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to stick to that at all.
No, absolutely.
It's kind of like how we're talking with homebrewing. You want to know the basic rules first before you start tinkering with the formula.
Absolutely.
I think it's really nice to know basic stuff about the world. And then from there, hey, if you want to change something, talk to your DM. It's like, hey, it'd be cool if I had a god named Ragnarok who his primary, field was candy corn. I don't know.
I'm there. I think we've got the makings of next campaign.
Ragnarok,
just unfolding before your eyes.
His profile is candy corn. Let's see it.
I like that you actually brought in rules as written lore, because I think for anyone who's going, lore is a massive topic. What do I do?
Yeah.
There's a lot of it that has been handed to you. Depending on what campaign setting you're running in, if you want to use a breadth of lore that's already there at your fingertips that you don't have to grind on and put all together.
Right.
I mean, that's really what the campaign settings are there for.
Yeah. And there's so many different versions. Like some have the different planes of existence. Then you have like the world tree where you have the different planes of existence. So if you're like, I don't like this as much, maybe dig a little deeper. You might find even something else that you don't like.
And what I like is I think it's a great place to start. We've touched in a number of other episodes. For me, half the reason of sitting in the DM chair is because I don't want to play. I don't want to be able to name a module and someone goes like, oh yeah, we're doing that too. You know?
Right. Oh, then you can talk. Yeah.
So, and again, that's to each their own, but I do think it's a good place to start. You know, you should stand on the shoulders of giants and then go, okay, what can I do from here? What else can I do with this space?
Right.
But I really like it should at least be mentioned in a conversation on lore that there is so much already written, decades of lore that have been put to the page. So don't neglect those. Yeah. But I definitely find myself that there are campaign settings that I just love the setting, and then I go like, great, now I'm going to bastardize the shit out of this. Like I'm going to make it my own. Right. And that's really kind of at a broad scale. But a great example, like we're kind of talking about the trade-off between player and DM lore. A great example in our campaign is, a massive hunk of the lore for the East is that our campaign starts on the heels of a civil war.
Yep.
That was directly grafted into the game because a big element of your backstory was that you were a soldier. And so I had to go, okay, well, what would a soldier have been doing for 5 years? Right. It's a pretty lame backstory if it's like, well, mostly it was R&R. We were stationed in a few places, played some volleyball, it's like, but simultaneously, I didn't want you by profession or by allegiance to already be pre-drafted into a conflict that maybe you don't actually care about.
There was some of that, but yeah, you're right. I wasn't tied to it.
Right. Yeah. And so that's a really good example. And this is a good example of the way that we kind of build the world cooperatively is I kind of give you guys a general sense of the world. And we've played in the Forgotten Realms before. We're all pretty familiar with this space. But then as you guys are kind of providing the information about your characters, that's fertilizer in the field for me to go, how can I take what you're telling me about your character, where your character's been, what they've been up to, and make that something more interesting than just your past? How can that still be tethered? And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes you don't want them to still be tethered to those aspects. But I think that's a certainly from a player standpoint, any players that are listening to this, I would highly encourage anyone to have a discussion with their DM about how involved how much exchange is there in that process. Again, there's many DMs that are just going to they're building their world, and their expectation is that you're going to build a character to conform to that. But as we said before, every table's different. The table you're sitting at, your DM may be very excited to sit down and work with you on how your backstory can be, some aspect of a much broader lore for the space that these events are going to play out in.
Here's a question for you. So let's say the DM has a pre-idealized idea of what their lore in the world is going to be. And as a player, I try to create my world and they say, no, this is my world and this is how it's going to be. Is that a warning sign, or is that just, hey, that's just someone's personal preference?
Well, if it's a warning sign, I think you're gonna go through a laundry list of DMs. I think a lot of DMs, and I think rightfully so, they've got a lot on their plate in terms of trying to make a cohesive world. To have any one character step in and create a story that simply, now I'll say, I think this should be taken with a grain of salt, because I think there should be a certain amount of thinking on your toes and flexibility when you're building out these worlds. But that's me. I know a lot of people who think about their worlds in, let's say, a much more rigid fashion, like these are the factions in this space, and there is not room for other factions in there. That I think is, that's pre-session zero. That's conversation away from the table with between your players and your DMs. to sort out. Like if I go, there's no elves in the world. The elves were wiped out, and you decide to build an elf anyways. There's going to be an issue.
What was that one where he didn't allow monks? So he made
this is a. That was Gamers 2 Dorkness Rising.
Oh my God.
If you have not seen that, definitely give that a spin and drop us in the comments. Give us a how many stars? 1 through 10, how many stars is Gamers 2 Dorkness Rising?
Well, I thinking about that because I was like, hey, is that a warning sign about DMs? It's also a warning for us players to like respect what the DM's laying down as well.
Right.
Like there's of course lines. There's a spectrum. Like if the DM is being tyrannical, okay, that might be something that might not be the game you want to play at. But as a player, if you're like, no, this is my character and I'm going to do it the way I want to, your world be damned, then you're not going to be you're not going to be a good player.
Yeah. I mean, if it's coming to the head where people are actively disregarding the wishes of someone that someone's already stated. I would go so far as to say you're probably sitting at the wrong table. Yeah. Either the DM or the players. And I kind of want to pivot away from kind of that introductory space.
Yeah.
Because I think it sounded like you already had a track that you wanted to go
on.
But I wanted to kind of get in the meat and potatoes.
That's exactly what. Man, great minds. I was gonna literally say I want to get to the meat and potatoes.
And here's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that's the first time anyone's ever used the phrase meat and
coined
potatoes to reference the body of something.
Well done, sir.
Well done.
Yeah. Definitely not the Irish or anyone else thought of meat and potatoes.
So yeah, I mean, go ahead and hit me with what you had in mind.
Yeah. So as a DM, I think it's a huge challenge to create this world, to get the lore, to make it a organic world. That is a huge undertaking. But I feel like another huge undertaking is how do you communicate this organic world to the players in a meaningful way?
Yeah. And I think that question, I was going to say is twofold. It's probably about 12-fold.
That's a big question.
But I think for starters, something that I would want to highlight is that that question puts the onus on the DM to communicate that. And absolutely, we have our machinations. We know there's this really cool dungeon that we want you to go to.
Oh, but we won't go there. And we're going to talk to that tavern keep about his son that you've mentioned offhandedly.
Yeah. Don't bring up David into this conversation.
I love that you think I have any memory of any name you've ever given me.
There's none.
I don't remember any of them.
No, but I think I really think that fundamentally, I actually think that the line is a lot closer to the DM's job is to instantiate compelling, meanthemeaningful lore into the world.
Okay.
And I actually think that's pretty close to a full stop. Now, we don't just full stop because there's things that we've schemed up that we love. And we know that we're going to want to try to steer things a little bit. We know we're going to...
Right.
But fundamentally, and I think for the better of the game in general, that lore simply should be in existence for the players to interact with.
Okay.
The more I'm having to hand you something,
okay,
or I should say, where I'm going, here you go, take this.
It's a book that has all the lore into it.
Whatever. I mean, anything.
Okay.
As opposed to you going, can I see that? Can I borrow that? Will you hand me that?
Hey, what is that interesting thing I see in the corner?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the difference between... Now, there are absolutely times where we'll shove something into your hands.
Yeah, you have to.
And you'll go like, what the heck? And again, from a contrast standpoint, sometimes it is good to foist something. That could be the start of an adventure hook. But in general, the reward that a player, I think, receives by organically digging into, if they find something that interests them and they dig a little deeper and they find more that interests them, now it's a deal where when that lore comes to light, when that lore, which ultimately provides them the secret word to open that door, which provides them the location of the thing that they're looking for, whatever it is, it's far less meaningful if I prodded you 9 times to go look behind that rock.
Yeah.
Go open that book. I think we cross that line as DMs all the time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with crossing the line and going, you know what, I got to throw a little breadcrumb out there. I got to do this. I want them to do this. I would love to see them check this out. But I really do think that in terms of the give and take of the broader experience at the table, the less a DM is feeling they need to cross that line, one, the more engaged that likely means the players are with that world. And again, there's an innate reward when the players have dug something up. Again, that if we're letting them dig up meaningless lore,
right?
It's just like a great correlation is when we're talking about the exploration pillar.
Okay.
Think about lore as a hex map. The lore of your world is this big hex grid that you can. If I put nothing of interest in there, how long are you going to explore through that space?
I won't explore. Yeah.
Whereas, so from a lore standpoint, when you're finding lore, if you go like, whoa, it says dwarves are on average shorter than humans. Look at these glyphs. And you go like, that means nothing to me. And it could also just be ego fuel. We kind of had chatted about lore serving to prop up a DM's look at this amazing. It could just be lore like that, like where they're finding lore that's telling them about the world. But a good way, I think, of thinking about disseminating lore, is, and I've just been thinking about this increasingly as we've been talking about it. I think dissemination of lore for a given area, is a fundamentally structured as kind of a large jigsaw puzzle.
Okay.
And that jigsaw puzzle, let's say that this is ancient lore. You've come to some old temple, completely abandoned.
Okay.
You guys at this point have no idea. Was this a religious institution?
Right.
Was
Who
this
lived there before?
And
all
so you basically have the frame of a puzzle with none of the pieces in it.
Right.
Now, my job as a DM is littered all throughout this temple should be pieces.
Okay.
And if you guys are collecting those pieces and going like, oh, look, I found XYZ, and I think this is the room that scripture was talking about. Look, there's this giant throne, there's this.
Right.
Now they're starting to go, okay, and in that scripture, they mentioned something about a treasure. There's something about. So I mean, now they are beginning to collect up these little pieces that are telling a story that could be ancient. It could be completely contemporary. I mean, this could be a hustling and bustling temple, but there's more going on than meets the eye. There's a different kind of lore taking place there. But I really think that's a good way of thinking about, as a DM, which puzzle pieces do I want to put in this place? Because if I'm putting a puzzle piece in that space for you to find, and it does nothing to provide you a better sense of that picture, or to reinforce why knowing the whole picture is important, then it's probably lore for lore's sake at that point.
Right. Okay. So you made like 10 points.
Yeah,
so I'll try to go back through there and ask questions and see. When you're talking about don't just present the lore to the characters versus just trying to tell to the player characters, I'm reminded of I might be alienating a whole bunch of our audience. I don't know if you've seen the original 1980s Dune and compared to the new Dune that just came out.
Okay.
Because the original Dune, I love it. I'm a huge fan of it, though it's horrible. It's a guilty pleasure.
You right there, you may have just alienated.
It's fine. It's fine. I don't mind. I don't mind. The sleeper must awaken. But they did such a poor job, and I can admit this freely, of giving information to the audience. It was, boom, water, Arrakis, desert planet, water's very rare, sandworms, what is it? They literally tell you that through a journal. They tell you so much through exposition. Versus the new Dune, they don't show you that they don't tell you Arrakis is dry. They show you it's dry. They don't, I mean, they tell you it's hostile, but you get a feeling of how just brutal it is by how the people interact with the world. I think that's more how you should be approaching giving out lore.
Definitely show, don't tell. Address for me from the player perspective.
Yeah.
Kind of my initial point being, I'm drawing this line here where I have created a bunch of interesting lore in the world.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hand any of it to you.
Okay.
It's just there. So there's a cave somewhere in the woods.
Yeah.
And you guys are aware that, you're going to be exploring these woods.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
So
that's my framework.
So you enter this cave.
Right.
What is the player's responsibility? If you want to call it responsibility, may not be the best word for it, but certainly I think it's fair to say the DM's responsibility is to make sure there's interesting lore to interact with.
Well, perhaps, and this is where it also gets for a player to learn their DM. Maybe your DM is not as lore focused, where they put lore into the cave. Maybe that in the DM's mind, oh yeah, it's just a Kobold cave. Yeah, they've been living there. That's all it is.
Absolutely.
So as a player, you get to learn kind of who your DM is and how important the lore is to them. So especially at the beginning stages, I would really make it obvious to like, hey, again, okay, let's go with the cave entrance thing. So you come up with a cave entrance and you see strange markings on the top of the cave.
Perfect. So there's a little bit of lore that's now been injected into this space.
And then the player characters have a chance to interact. Maybe if they interact with it, they can discover, oh, it's a Kobold cave. And now they're better prepared for what's in the cave.
So here's the question. If they don't interact with that,
then they go in and it's a Kobold cave and it is.
But have they been negligent in their responsibilities? Clearly the DM instantiated some lore into that space. Yeah. If they just go like, well, there's some strange runes. I know I can cast comprehend language, but nah, let's just go in. And like I said, nothing wrong with that.
No.
But it's
especially a young party, a new party.
Absolutely.
And that's probably, oh, look at those weird marks. They're not going to try to figure it out. But
well, and even more, so I would also say that if all that says is like, beware, there are gnolls here, I would argue that that's meaningless lore, other than to say, like, that's information you would have whether you read the sign or not. You're going to walk in there and be like, there's kobolds here.
Or maybe it could be like, instead of markings, maybe it's like, oh, there's a severed head of humans outside. Oh shit, there is some bad stuff in here.
Right.
And that might be a better way, because that might be more gnoll territory. I don't think kobolds do that as often. I might be wrong. But
well, I think but to your point, that there is something inherently interesting and that is asking to be interacted with by way of runes. Right. Let's say that if they do interact with them, that those runes provide some clue to a hidden room inside the cave.
Or maybe if they don't read the words, they go into any kobolds or trap makers, they immediately are trapped. And then, okay, now this is a whole different encounter where you're trying to escape being imprisoned.
Right.
Versus you kicking some kobold ass.
Yeah. I guess the crux of my question is it incumbent upon the DM to provide to hand them that lore, or to simply go, it's there for them to interact with.
It's there for them to interact with.
And I think that's something that, especially for new DMs, that's a difficult thing. You've worked hard on this.
That's what must even be heartbreaking.
Yeah. But I also think that there are times where you want to spoon feed some information to your party. Again, you will come to know those times. But I can absolutely say that when you get to the end of an adventure hook, you've traveled to some far off this old temple, whatever. When you get to the end, you've fought the boss, you've beyond fighting the boss, you've solved whatever mystery still lingered here. If all of the clues to solving that mystery were spoon-fed to you, it might as well not have been an encounter, or it shouldn't have even been part of it. And that's, I guess, ultimately my point is, and importantly is, the more you get in the habit of spoon feeding that type of information, the more you're telling your party, you don't need to worry about exploring this world and searching for the little mysteries that exist in it.
And that's what I was just going to say. If you start to do that as a player, you start to take ownership. This lore is no longer just a DM; it is my lore.
Yes.
Which makes it so much more meaningful.
Yeah, and we had even made mention. I mean, and I think actually a portion of Aurora 101's inquiry had to do with, what happens if you're utilizing some lore and come to realize, like, oh, this isn't what I want anymore. This is when I
Okay.
And what I love that you just said there is the players taking ownership over the lore. Now they didn't write that lore. They didn't decide what lore existed in the temple. But one of the amazing things that happens when you let players engage with the world and engage with each other is they begin to postulate what and this is I mean
This has bitten us in the ass more than once, by the way.
well in some cases I mean you guys have thought up some amazing encounters that I went like next session we're doing that.
Yeah, thanks for killing our horses, by the way, Tom. Yeah.
Well, whoever conceptualized,
I think it was me too. I don't want to say it to the
was
party, but
you.
it's probably me.
But importantly is because you've taken the reins on the consumption of that lore. Like I said, now you're invested in it. And so now you're thinking about it, you're talking about it. And there was just a conversation maybe a week or two ago on Twitter where we were talking about DMs have a lot of tools at their disposal. Their players are one of those tools, and they are probably one of the most underrated tools is to listen to the things your players think might be happening in the world. Because sometimes I mean, there are times where absolutely in our campaign where someone has said like, oh, what if this means this and this means this?
Yeah, connecting all the dots.
And then I go like, that's not right at all, but I love that. Like, and so there's a great way in which you may have scaffolded something out and your players just beat you to the punch. They I mean, like I said, it's not a common occurrence, but I would say stay agile in those moments. If you see something unfolding that that really intrigues you, that really gets your juices flowing, there is nothing wrong with shifting gears and pivoting.
Yeah.
It's also a great exercise in staying agile in general as a DM.
Right. And I know that's something you said when you first like why you DM. One of the things you said is like you like the collaborative storytelling. And
absolutely.
And lore and what we're talking about is exactly what that is.
Yeah, yeah. I think that also this is a little bit of a pivot, but lore is also disseminated very differently depending on which pillar of gameplay lore is being disseminated through. The two big ones, I think, that
social and exploration.
Social and exploration. For that reason, I just kind of want to pat combat on the head for
how the heck do you
there's so much creature lore.
That's
true. The thing is let's say you've just entered, we'll continue with this cave concept.
Yeah,
you've just entered this cave space, and let's say that this cave is infested. I'm going to use this because it's a classic, and it's one that everyone's going to immediately go like, I already know the lore on that.
Yeah.
And so there's no sense of discovery there, but let's imagine you did not know the lore. It's trolls have held up in this cave. There's some mangy troll has kind of decided like, I'm the king of this part of the mountain. And, maybe he's got a dozen or so, a court of a dozen or so lesser trolls. The sheer elation that a party would experience the first time they're engaging with these trolls in combat and realizing no matter how much I'm hacking these things down, they keep on coming. We've driven all the way back out to the cave entrance. When you finally understand the lore and go, we need fire, we need acid. This is such a trope. I mean, so many people know this.
It's almost
but it's a great example of, because I can still definitively remember when I was growing up. This might have been, anyways, the original Baldur's Gate. There and a troll encounter and going like,
is it possible?
What the hell is going on here? But the interesting thing is so many creatures have their own lore, and troll is such an obvious one. But for instance, when we were doing our top 10, let's say you guys just encountered the shadow. First time you get hit and you lose 1d4 strength.
Right.
You have just learned something, and you've also learned to fear these creatures. So that it's a very, very kind of short-sighted lore dump, I guess you could say. But when you're designing your own encounters, be thinking about the ways in which you can demand that your players learn something during that encounter. And combat is a great teacher. They'll learn quick. They'll try, if you go, I'm going to go ahead and attack, you roll a crit, boom, it does nothing, 0 damage.
Okay.
You go, okay. Now you're thinking.
Right.
Now it's no longer, let's just kill this thing and move on.
Right.
Now you're going, what do I need to learn here?
Yeah. So I just remembered another encounter that you did that I thought was Twofer, the rat. So
Topher. Very close.
Very close. For me, that's about 100% right there. Yeah. So for the Cal fought just a rat.
It was just a plain, not even like a D&D rat, like a rat you would go to Petco and take home with you.
But what was its AC? Like 26.
Oh, his AC was frighteningly high.
Yeah,
well, he was the hero rat of the Shattered Canyon.
But so Cal tries to fight this thing and he can't stab it. So I had to think outside the box. Okay, how can I deal damage? So I went through different damage types, and eventually I was able to conquer Topher, whatever his name is. Topher the rat. I still remember that as being a really fun encounter.
Yeah, well, it was just kind of a goofball. Yeah. He had I think he was a 26 AC, but he had 1 hit point.
Right.
And he, so it was really, and Moonbeam rapidly made short work of Topher. But so I definitely think keeping lore in mind in your combat is going to serve to make you a better encounter builder. If you're thinking about, what are my characters going to not understand about these adversaries?
Right.
And how can I make it exciting for them to learn those things they don't already know?
Well, and to go off that, so let's say they're fighting the trolls. Don't be like, hey, okay, you attack, and as you attack, okay, you did some damage, but he heals now for 2 hit points. Make it an interesting, like, as your sword connects, and as your sword cleaves the flesh, even as it leaves, you start to see it mending.
Right.
And then it's an organic storytelling.
Right. And yeah, I think that it becomes a deal where they immediately recognize, okay, these things are regenerating faster than we can hurt them.
Right.
And again, kind of in the same way that I alluded to, lore often plays as a puzzle. The puzzle is, what lever do we need to pull to stop these things from regenerating? And again, it's such common knowledge now
at
that
this point. But you're right. There's so many, and you could hey, let's say instead of just regular trolls, you have a ice troll, who can only be hurt by ice. I mean, you could really play with it.
Yeah, you could completely tweak things around. But so again, we won't spend too much time on combat because I think there's absolutely lore about the world to disseminate. But the 2 primary vehicles by which I think we communicate lore in the game, or ways in which we communicate lore, are through the social pillar and the exploration pillar.
Okay. Yeah. Let's get to the shrimp and French fries of it. Is that going to take off, you think? Shrimp and French fries?
I have no doubt that's probably going to be. That's going to be huge.
That sounds horrible. Actually, nothing against shrimp and French fries.
I love shrimp and French fries. I don't know what you're talking about.
How many times have you gone to a restaurant and gotten shrimp and French fries?
A basket of butterflied shrimp and French fries is like a common thing, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm obviously Coloradoan who we don't eat seafood ever.
That's the lore of an entirely different part of the part of the.
All right, so
world.
to get to the shrimp and French fries, which I guess is way more relevant than I thought it was.
Yeah, that's not bad. No, but I think let's start talking about social, because I actually think a huge amount, especially in modern D&D, is communicated through the social pillar.
Well, because social, I think, is dominated too.
I think it has elevated itself, or I should say, has been elevated. I actually think it's one of the oversights. It's a pitfall that new tables have fallen into, because in the vein of show, don't tell. I mean, sure, I'm not giving you an exposition dump. Maybe I'm giving you an exposition dump with an accent. Maybe I'm,
but it's still a dump.
Yeah. And interestingly, there's a ton of lore that you can disseminate about your NPCs, about the world around them. The nice part about social, and it depends how invested you are in engaging in the social pillar, what boxes you check
Right.
in that space. An interaction just recently from the Rakish Rovers campaign, Aster was kind of prodding Fillion about his background.
Yeah.
And I think that interaction was a really good example of intentionally fending off an exposition dump. There are times where your characters, your NPCs as a DM, and certainly your characters as players. I mean, obviously, there's times where you don't want to share something.
Yeah.
Where you don't even want to have a conversation, period. Nothing wrong with that. I think, again, as DMs go, especially when you're first starting out, it can be a little invigorating to have a player start engaging with an NPC, especially one that has a lot of information about what they need to know.
Right.
It can be very, very effective to play coy. You have to consider that. Now, there are some characters, maybe you've written a character who's all, oh, hi there, I'm so glad to come to see my place, and I'm going to tell you everything about my place.
Don't we have that? Who was that guy?
No, that was...
We've seen him.
He was in Fort Hill. He was part of the...
Yeah, he tried to sell shelves, I think.
Yeah, well, everything but the shelves.
Oh,
everything was
excuse me.
for sale, yeah. But
he died in a horrible explosion, as did most people.
Yep.
Thanks, DM. That was some good lore, bud.
How many other towns have you been to that ended in a fiery apocalypse?
Hey, out of the 3 towns we've been to, only one has exploded in a fiery apocalyptic fireball.
That's pretty good. No, but so I think that there are characters absolutely who you've just written them to. I mean, they're just kind of a diarrhea of the mouth NPC.
Right.
But most people, just like in real life, most NPCs, they don't know you. They're not, again, a great opportunity to allow the smooth talker in the group to come pony up a gold piece to get a little more information and kind of take on that heroic role. That's the DM, again, drawing that line and going, I spent 2 weeks prepping for this session.
Yeah.
I've got something here, but I'm going to let you coax it out of me because it's more rewarding when you do.
Yeah, and it empowers the player too, especially the charismatic bard. It's probably a bard.
Well, if you're in if you're in a social space, so it's a great example of, let's just say you go, hey barkeep, anything interesting going on around here? And the barkeep goes like, maybe he goes like, no, nothing interesting is going on around here. Not since the damn governor shut down the XYZ.
Boom. That's huge. Huge plot hook there.
But so you've provided some information there. Now
but it's not like, yes, adventure. I'm funny you should ask that. We need you to kill these rats.
Right. Well, and if it's a deal where at that point they go like, okay, we're going there and we're going to talk to the governor.
Yeah.
Who has ever said, is anything interesting going on? And someone goes like, nope, not since all this bullshit and you go, is something going on, bud? Like, is something like, to just go like, okay, I've gotten everything that I need from you.
I see what you're saying.
That all you've done is go, there is something of interest to interact with here. But again, you've set the stage for the party. All you're going is, there's the line.
Right.
And then as a DM, you're going, I've got other customers to serve. I've got, whatever. It's in their hands again. And I really want to emphasize, give them a nibble and then put it back in their hands.
Right. And that's great. And going off that, I know we're talking about social, and just envisioning this bar scene, it doesn't have to be social. There could be some exploration pillar in there too, where maybe there's a wanted poster.
I love it.
Or maybe there's a stereotypical guy with the hood over his, who obviously looks like
an Aragorn in the corner.
I know, smoking a pipe, and it just that is a great scene, by the way. Yeah. You can throw out try not to be too stereotypical, but I mean, you can go into the exploration there too.
Well, and that's really, like I said, I wanted to hit on social, and I don't want to quite pivot to exploration yet, but it is, but it's a great example of the way in which a DM has a lot more control over dissemination of information in the social pillar.
Heck, sorry. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
You can even bring combat. Oh, all of a sudden, hey, barkeep, what's going on in town? Boom. Some thugs bust in and try to break up
probably the governor's men. They're probably going to shut it down. It's a prohibition. There's a problem. Boom,
there's combat lore.
Absolutely.
I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, absolutely. But all I was getting at is what you just described is the shady figure in the corner.
Yeah.
The wanted poster. those are all things that the party has to have said, what's on the job board?
Right.
Who is there anyone else in the tavern? If you walk in and I go, oh, the place looks pretty dead. You see, there's 3 other patrons kind of scattered around. Barkeep gives you a smile and come on in. What can I get you? If you get something like that, well, then the question is, I just told you there's a few other patrons.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I've just drawn that line. At which point you can go, well,
what about those other patrons?
Precisely, or not. And again, sometimes as a DM, they're totally innocuous patrons who are just enjoying their drink.
Yep.
Usually that means if you go like, I'm going to go talk to him. He's drunk and he doesn't really want anything to do with you, or he'll happily accept a drink if you want to buy him one.
But even there's opportunities. Like,
that's what I'm talking about. Yes. Even there's opportunities. That's what that is the crux of everything. Dissemination of lore.
Yeah.
There is opportunity everywhere. I mean, imagine, and I'm going to let you get to your point. But you just struck it right on the head is, let's say, okay, we're both fathers.
Okay.
You come home, your child is missing.
Oh, shit.
Okay.
Okay.
If there are a potential opportunity in front of you to gather information about that, do you pursue it or do you go like, she's missing. I guess I'll go. I guess I'm going to go see what the governor's men are doing up in the, you players are in the world with a purpose. They're trying to do something. Anytime they're going somewhere, they're doing it for reasons, and they should be motivated and compelled to lift up those rocks, tap people on the shoulder, to consume that lore.
Right.
Again, then they're putting the onus back on, hey, I'm consuming. Give me something meaningful, bud. Like, make sure my time isn't being wasted. And that's where it's back on the DM to go, I have instantiated interesting things into this space.
I was going to think, I thought of an example. And I always harken back to them. Even though I haven't watched a lot of the episodes, they always stick with me. In season 2 of Critical Role, when the party, Taliesin, I forget his character's name. He was a tiefling, and I forget his name.
Molly Mock.
Thank you, Molly Mock. And he was going through a bar, and he was asking people. And he ran into one who I don't think gave any information, but what he did was he let the party know that there is some prejudice against tieflings. So he did not give them information about what was happening in the town. All it was communicating the lore of the world. Like, hey, by the way, tieflings, they have a bad reputation, so you got to be careful a little bit. Boom, there's a wonderful opportunity.
And if that doesn't shape the rest of your interactions in that space, if you've just been blatantly told there are people who are racist against you, that should fundamentally change the way you think about moving in that space. Are you going to be the guy who changes all of their opinions? Are you going to be the guy who puts his hood up and draws a mask and skulks their way through? Again, the decision's yours, but you have information to actuate on now.
And it impacts me, which means I take ownership. Again, I think that's a big part of the lore. In order to make lore meaningful, is that the player characters need to take ownership of it.
Absolutely,
that is huge.
And I think that's a great segue into. There's plenty to be said on the social.
We could talk about all day.
But pivoting into when we're talking about players taking ownership, I think there is no pillar of gameplay in which pretty much across the board, players are more in the driver's seat than in the other, like if we're having a conversation, you're talking to an NPC, we're on pretty level ground. I'm an NPC, so I'm existing in the scene. You're a player, you're existing in the scene. We're exchanging information or, something's happening between us. Combat, I'm one portion of that. Exploration, the DM is just kind of hovering above. Maybe I'm going to introduce combat. Maybe I'm going to introduce social. But as long as we're in exploration, the DM is not really in the scene. And so who else but the players are holding the reins for consuming that lore? And exploration is one of those places where, let's say you're exploring a single room. We'll just make it a 20-foot by 20-foot room.
Okay.
And let's say it's scattered with all manner of, let's say it was someone's workshop. quite old. I mean, an inch of dust laying on everything. So this
Sounds
is
familiar.
ancient, and you can see some very interesting knickknacks laying around.
We have literally run into this, by the way.
It is certainly within the player's purview to just go like, looks like someone's workshop, and then continue right on into the next room. Yeah, and that's totally fine. But
I'm going to ask you about this later once, because I'll interrupt.
Yeah, no, please do.
How does it break your DM heart when we don't? Because I know we've probably skipped stuff before.
I think it's a deal where it's something, and this goes out to if you're a DM struggling with it. If you are a new DM, get comfortable with the players not engaging with every piece of information that you develop.
That might be really hard.
I think it is. It's because there are times where now, and this is where that line is. Mm-hmm. If there's something that I am so hyped about, I'm not going to let you miss it. Again, that sounds pretty hard and fast, but I might, again, we talk about motivations in some of our other episodes. I've talked about it on DM and the PM.
You should, hey, have you checked out DM and the PM? He just had a pretty special guest, Dungeon Coach, by the way. Great episode. You should check it out.
And great guy. If you guys, I was about to say if you guys are not familiar with Dungeon Coach, but obviously you're already going to be. But go show him some love over on his channel.
Yeah, great guy. Great guy.
Drop him a comment. Tell him Modern Myth sent you.
you 39 subscribers we have as of this day.
But so that's where I think a lot of the motivation comes in, is understanding what's going to motivate your players to try and steer them in the direction of the things that you are really excited about.
Yeah.
Now, here's another really, there are so many times where the things that are exciting you about a space aren't tethered to that space's lore inherently. It might be a really cool combat, a really cool trap, a really cool puzzle.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So they passed it up. Cool. I grab that and I go, I'm going to use this somewhere else. Because I love it. And,
why would you
and
not?
there's no reason
that you recycle it.
Absolutely. I mean, there are times where if it's lore related and it is absolutely tethered to, this temple that we've bounced back to a couple of times. Sure. Let's say it's a temple to some sun god, some ancient, no one even recalls the name.
Right.
And there was this really awesome puzzle, that kind of puzzle trap combo, and I was like, oh, this is gonna wreck them. And they just went like, well, it seems like a dumb old temple. Come on, let's go kill some rats. And they just
rats. Nothing wrong with killing rats.
That could certainly be the case, but I would say it's far better to concede that they're not engaging with that space the way you thought that they would. And unless it's absolutely prohibitive, take what you loved about what you had worked up there and just find somewhere else that you can introduce it into the...
Yeah, work smarter, not harder, right?
There you go. Work smarter, not harder. That's a big one for all the DMs. But in that exploration vein, that is really the place when I'm talking about the jigsaw puzzle of understanding. We'll just say that final picture, one, needs to be meaningful. And when I say meaningful, I mean meaningful to the party. Because maybe I've made this awesome temple and this awesome sun god and blah, 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 blah. And you guys find every single piece. You have the whole picture. You're looking at it and you're going like, do you guys realize this was a temple to a sun god? And he was a god.
Yeah.
And everyone goes like,
cool beans.
Great, we should have killed those rats, like I said an hour ago.
Yeah.
But if you go, do you guys realize this is a temple to the sun god? And this scripture right here, it tells us exactly what we need to do with that door that we saw way back where. And now the door that you guys didn't think you were going to open, or maybe you didn't even know was a door, now that opens. Now there's a whole dungeon that you didn't know was there.
Right.
And the end of that dungeon is the real prize for this. I mean, whatever it ends up being.
That happened to us in the Old Peltark.
Old Peltark is a perfect example of...
the rings... which I was able to keep on for a while.
And this is the best part about Old Peltark is, I was talking actually with Amanda about this, is you guys actually found the location of the first ring just happenstandtially. As you were exploring through, you came across the illusory forest.
Right.
And
oh God, yeah, we critted, I think.
She rolled a crit on her perception and was like, and she realized like, this isn't woods. There is an opening to like a tomb down here.
Yep.
And so you guys happenstantially found that. And as I was laying out the lore of that space, I was like, well, here's this cool lore. There was these kind of 3 hands to the emperor, and they had all been conspiring, even though the general didn't know he was part. He had been framed, and there was this whole thing.
It's quite a story.
Yeah, and so all of that is laid out, and I was going, well, the master of coin, who was kind of the puppet master of this, or thought he was the puppet master of this, his is going to be the hardest to find. So I just put a ton of lore noting. So you knew, hey, there's a 3rd player in this space.
Yeah.
Assuming, hey, you're going to find General Crenshaw's tomb. You're going to find Gallus's, because they're in the same compound, I guess you could say. And then you're going to be going, okay, we found 2 rings. We can see that this door is going to require a 3rd to open.
Right.
And then the question, that's where I thought the real exploration was going to begin. Is
no,
but it's a good example of how. Imagine if there was no vault.
Okay.
And literally, my expectation was you're just gonna go like, "Wow, did you see there was going to be this?"
We never would have looked.
There was a betrayal. Ring. It was this cool thing. Like there was an obvious prize for finding the other puzzle pieces and knowing the whole picture.
Here's a question for you then, and let's say we didn't crit and we didn't find the tomb, so we go through Old Peltark. We found the 2 rings, so we needed 3. Found 2 rings. Was there hints within the temple to find the 3rd? Like, hey. The ring was stolen by someone and he ran into the forest. Could we have found lore like that?
You guys did, in fact, find lore like that. I don't think it was very meaningful to you because you had already. You guys actually went, we need to go back to that tomb, because you just peeked down and you were like,
oh, that's right.
We're coming back to this. I think.
That's right.
But there was numerous mentions within some of the documents that you guys had
found.
Which
is so huge. Because, again, if you're like, even if like, okay, there's obviously needed to be a 3rd ring. Old Peltark was a mine. And we could have spent like all this time looking for it. It's like, well, I guess we didn't find a ring. I guess it's not here. Well, unless you told us, hey, it's outside of this place. Here's some lore to back up where to find it.
And that was quite specifically, the Master of Coin on a number of occasions said, Gallus and Crenshaw, I don't trust those guys. I'm not throwing my lot in with them. I am storing my portion of the treasure.
Right.
Elsewhere.
Okay.
So at a minimum, you knew it's not in the main compound.
Right.
And again, then you're back to your hex grid exploration, which was just kind of what that kicked all that off. That, I guess, is my point, is just like with exploration, if you are putting out a big old map where every rock they lift means nothing to them, there's no bad guy to fight, there's no NPC to talk to,
they're not going
to look.
Nope.
If every time they look under a rock and they find a piece of lore, it doesn't mean anything relative to their goals in that space.
Yeah.
Or I should say, it could also be relative to goals they don't even know they have in that space. For instance, the vault. You weren't in Old Peltark to find the vault.
No.
It just so happened. So Old Peltark, for our campaign, is a perfect explanation of a way in which you can create lore in a space that has nothing to do with why the party is there, and just go, if they start pulling these threads, they will be rewarded. If they don't, they'll move on and on to something else.
Right.
As it happens, that ended up being one of the largest rewards I've ever instantiated in the game.
Yeah, you're stingy as a DM, by the way. And
you know.
That was nice to actually have some gold for once. I think we spent most. Actually, no, we're still riding high off that money.
You spent a lot of that money.
We needed to, because you're, you. Yeah. So social is probably the most difficult to introduce lore.
Well, world lore, I'd say it's combat. I mean, I really do think that combat tells you a lot about what's happening in those 6-second intervals.
Right.
I think social is a pretty easy way to disseminate it, but I think...
But do it well.
Well, I think that, again, if that information is being disseminated without prompt, all you're doing is doing an exposition dump.
Thank you. I'm reminded of the conversation we had with immersion and flow state, and where you need to create challenges that are in the middle. If everything is just hand given to you, you're not gonna do it. If everything is so hard it's impossible, you're not gonna do it. You want to find that sweet spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, that obviously those boundaries should be defined. Sometimes you should come across something that is just you're like, wow, that was easy. I can't believe that worked.
Yeah.
And other times you go like, retreat, like
it's an average, right? It's not every single one, but it's an average.
Absolutely. And on the subject of the social pillar, I think a good example, like when I'm thinking about an NPC who I know is going to carry some pertinent lore information, I generally have an idea of like how strapped that person is for coin, how easy they are to intimidate, how susceptible they are to persuasion.
Right.
These types of things, and just kind of knowing like, if it's an NPC and I go and the players come up to them and go, hey, we're looking for old Redbeard guy.
Yeah.
Him.
Old Redbeard guy.
Old Redbeard guy.
Sounds like a name I'd make up.
We're going with that. No, but if and so this guy might be best friends with him. He might have no idea who you're talking about. In either case, how quick is he going to be to go like, yeah, I know old Redbeard guy. I mean, these are just a bunch of well-armed and armored random strangers walk up. Maybe you're trying to kill the old Redbeard guy.
Sure.
Maybe you're, who knows? But it certainly behooves me when I'm thinking about dissemination of lore to know, like, we'll say that this is slightly younger black-bearded guy that you're talking to. And slightly younger black-bearded guy is falling on hard times. Could even be an adventure hook there. Like this guy's down and out. Well, if the party goes like, hey, this is who we're looking for, and we'll pay good money for valuable information.
Yeah.
Well, if I know he's hard up, like I might go, I mean, old Redbeard guy's a friend, but like my kid's got to eat. How much money? What are we talking about here?
Right.
Now we're somewhere. Whereas if the party just goes like, hey, old Redbeard guy, and he goes like, no, like what's he gonna? He's gonna sell him out for nothing. Like there's no. So having a list of criteria by which the party can actuate, and again, there might be NPCs where it's like, isn't hurting for coin. Is not going to be easy to intimidate.
Oh, everyone has their price, though. It's just a matter of finding it out.
Yeah. I guess if you're rolling around with 50,000 gold pieces, and
but price might not be gold. It might be
absolutely
something else.
And I mean, I love that pivot. Is if you come to believe that there is an NPC who's holding valuable information you need. I mean, there's a whole adventure hook in figuring out what that price is.
And
do you skulk along and go like, oh, this guy's got 2 kids, and we maybe aren't a morally,
Jesus.
like you
are you heroes?
That's it. Well, but it's a good example of the way in which if you're just not kidding. a fundamentally good party, you could extract information.
Or maybe there's that one player who's willing to do that, and the rest of the party might not, but you have that one player who's willing to do it. God, this is where...
What an awesome sneak out in the middle of the night. The rest of the party doesn't even know, and you just show up the next day going like, old Redbeard's hiding out in
How'd
the...
How'd you know that? Don't worry about it.
Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Don't ask questions you don't want to hear the answer to.
Well, and the cool thing is now we've now subdivided the lore space there.
Which is cool. And maybe you try to figure it out as well. And there you have to distinguish between player knowledge and character knowledge.
And there's things as a DM you could decide like, do I need the rest of the party to step away for this? However you decide that you want to run that. But I really think that a big crux of introducing lore into the space, it's something I think we've repeatedly hit on here, is don't, as a DM, be so desperate for your players to consume the cool lore that you've put into a place that in lieu of them seeking it out themselves, you just start shoveling it to them.
Yeah.
Because it loses all of the value and subtlety that made it so cool in the first place.
Yeah, let the players take ownership of the lore.
And again, you could be playing with a new group where they're maybe aren't as plugged in with this.
And it might take there might be some teaching moments. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
I would say if that's the case, give some serious thought to that initial adventure they go on. And again, ways that you can begin to not by going, hey guys, by the way, there's some cool lore you should check out here. And this is just a teaching moment. I'm not going to do this in the future.
No. Yeah.
But find some really cool ways where you can provide that information. And then, as we've touched on so many times, when they pull those threads, reward the hell out of them doing it.
I love that.
If that's what you want to see is more of that investigation.
Classical conditioning right there.
It's, it's Pavlovian players.
Ring that bell, make them drool. Absolutely.
No, I think that's a really important consideration as a DM, because it is a very hard thing to watch your players walk past something is meaningful to you. I think the real art form is to say, how can I make that meaningful to them without outright going, that rock you just passed by is glowing. It's glowing. That rock there is glowing.
It doesn't feel.
It's that doesn't feel good. And
you checked out the pockets of the kobold you just killed, and you found something that's glowing. Boom. I mean,
absolutely. And that's the other thing, is you may have had one idea of how you were going to introduce lore. Be ready to introduce that same lore can be introduced. You might go, they missed this opportunity, but they really need this information. I'm not a one-shot guy, but some of the best advice that I have ever heard about running one-shots was precisely that. Is that the party needs to go from A to B, and they need these 3 pieces of information to get to B, or the three things. Doesn't matter. A key, a password, and a magic sword.
Love it.
Cool. If it's obvious that they're not finding that, they haven't even, they don't even know they need a magic sword, you better start figuring out a way of getting them on that track.
Right.
That is not a call to going you find a note that says you also need to find a magic sword. That's not it. So, I really think that the idea of seeing meaningful lore in a given space be passed up by your players, that's an opportunity as a DM to be. You're not improving in the social pillar sense. You're improving in the exploration pillar sense, and going what might steer them back to that, or what might be a different way of steering them to the thing that they're looking for, that they're having a hard time finding on their own. And as parties get more experienced interacting in the exploration pillar, you have to do that less and less. They get better and better at turning over the right rocks. But I think keeping in mind those 3 fundamental differences with regard to the pillars is that you're disseminating different types of information, and you're disseminating that information in different ways.
Right.
When you're talking about those different pillars, but regardless of all those, in the same way that you would never go the troll's regenerating, it's almost like it needs fire or acid to stop. That's the exact same thing as the barkeep going after the miners never came back, and then there was some whispers about a dragon down there, but then some other guys checked it out, and turns out it wasn't a dragon, it was actually an owlbear, but no one's killed it. It's still down there, and apparently there's treasure too.
That would be
that.
Don't get me wrong, as a player, all right, let's go kill an owlbear. But it makes it hollow. It really does.
Well, you're going to get down there, as opposed to you maybe even go some miners went missing, and you go follow that breadcrumb.
Right.
Oh, turns out.
Oh, there's some feathers around where they got killed.
Right.
Boom.
And then as a DM, I may even want to go they're doing a great job with this.
Yeah.
Maybe the foreman for the Miners Guild goes sorry, I can't let you guys go in there. Rumors there's a dragon down there. And now you're going a dragon. Wait,
that doesn't make sense.
Now things aren't, so that's the other thing too, is sometimes your players are doing a very good job of following those.
They want to muddy it up a little bit.
Sometimes lore, people are wrong all the time.
Well, then there it goes to the challenge thing. If it's oh shit, they're fucking, this is easy for them, I need to interject some challenge.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
I love that. Beyond that, I guess the only real kind of closer with regard to lore is, and this is specifically off of one of Aurora 101's questions, is how do you take what they've been doing, and all roads ultimately need to lead to our BBEG.
Oh.
And I may not go so far as to even say BBEG, because I would break that down into smaller segments.
Okay.
I wouldn't. Now, certainly, if you're writing a long form campaign, you should probably have some idea of what the BBEG is doing.
Yeah.
What their motivations are, what they're doing.
And they're not stagnant. They're working in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you're going, okay, they're going into the mine to fight the owlbear. How does this tie to the? I would not start worrying about that too much. I would start worrying about how does the lore in this space tie to the owlbear, and then we're going to finish that. And now we're at a new place where now we can go. Is this next course of action? Is that bringing them closer to the BBEG? And ultimately, as DMs, we want that trajectory to slowly be closing. Now, if you're talking about running a 5-shot where the BBEG is after 5 sessions, you're probably thinking about that from session one.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about running a long form campaign, I would say think about your localized lore. I use the reference of concentric circles a lot, but think about your localized lore because that's what's meaningful. We talked about lore being meaningful to your players.
Right.
If you find some lore, now this is not to say this isn't useful sometimes, but if you find some lore that is pertinent to when you're level 17 and you're level 3, you know, like lore, it's like, this is weird. There's a strange necromantic glyph here, and I don't know.
Right. It turns out that it was part of a spell or
that's something very important for later. Great. That's one of the puzzle pieces for a much bigger puzzle. But worry about the puzzle at the resolution that you are assembling, or I should say your party is assembling right now.
Right.
And a great way, I think, of thinking about that is think about how or if, not every adventure hook that they're following is going to be meaningful to the broader big bad evil guy adventure.
Yeah.
But think about if there is an opportunity. Let's say that the boss is not an owlbear. Let's say, well, for our campaign, you guys have had numerous skirmishes and encounters with cultists of the Brothers of Noth.
Okay.
And you've come to learn that they are part of the larger evil that's
they have something to do with the big bad. Yeah.
And so, for instance, when you guys were under the origin tree, that was kind of a boss fight, if you will. You met a new boss. You guys actually, you do know their name now. Netherex. You know the name. Big mechanical armed, diseased looking dude.
Yep.
So this is a great way in which you kind of came to have this boss fight. You did not. There was no finisher to that.
Nope.
They ended up escaping, but you were given through part of your reward of that boss fight was more information about the big puzzle.
There you go. And so lore as a reward is pretty cool.
Lore as a reward, I think, is kind of the last point that I know I'm getting there in a roundabout way, but is to be thinking about how does the successes that the party finds in the world, as they are becoming more and more well-known as heroes. You know, at level 3, they have no business even thinking about a big bad evil guy who's going to challenge them at level 20.
Right.
But as they get to that place, finding ways of injecting those little bits of lore that starts them going, again, with the concentric circles in mind. Okay, we found the feathers. What could have feathers? That's weird. This guy's all slashed up. He's all clawed, and it looks like, it's like, something like a giant beak is carved a big triangle out of this guy's clavicle and neck area, and already maybe some more astute monster lore players might be going like, I might know what's going on here.
Right, that's an owlbear.
That's an owlbear.
Did you know?
But the cool thing is that as they have put those pieces together, like maybe they're entering the owlbear's lair now, fully well aware that they're going to fight an owlbear. And that's part of the reward of having assembled that whole puzzle. Maybe there's some different tactics they use going into that fight instead of going into another. But like we talked about, well, maybe that owlbear is inhabiting a chamber in this mine that has some older, more ancient implications. And those implications may well be where they pick up a puzzle piece. There should be puzzle pieces your characters pick up or your players pick up that mean nothing to them at face value.
Like the orb of knowing.
I
can't wait to. I remembered that. I was like, there's a plot hook that needed to be picked up again.
So, I think it's great to, if you've got an awesome cryptic piece of lore that you can hand your players and it can ride around with them. The Manifesto rode around with you guys for a little while before she really started digging into it.
Yep.
And that was a massive deal.
Right, that was massive.
So keep in mind too that your players are doing all sorts of things with their time. There are times where they could be holding the MacGuffin, and they don't realize it because it's not a MacGuffin yet. It will be,
but you don't know yet.
All the better if they held it for like 6 levels, lost it, only to find out that it was the MacGuffin.
That's happened to me before because I drank the.
Oh yeah.
That's 4E,
but so I think that there's some big consideration for the ways in which we move through those concentric circles. I would say worry about what's right in front of you from a lore standpoint. And if you're spinning something that's much broader than that,
right?
Find your little opportunities to introduce those pieces. And as your players begin putting those together and kind of now they're starting to put together the picture of like, oh my God, it's a red dragon. That's the big bad's a red dragon.
Right.
Now is your opportunity that they found that hook. They found that on their own. You supplied these little pieces, but you demanded that they connect the dots, not go like, oh well, it's gonna be a red dragon. It's So and again, it loses all meaning the second that you start connecting those dots for your players. So.
Absolutely, yeah. Let the players take ownership of their lore. Absolutely.
Last thoughts from a player side.
Again, I feel like this is a much more DM centric topic. Which is nothing wrong with that. Players also do have the responsibility, though. Advice for players: the DMs are if they're trying to draw your attention to something, don't ignore it, because you're doing yourself a disservice. Because they're trying to make a rich, organic world, and if you don't take those hooks, then you're robbing it sucks for the DM because he put all that work into it, but you're robbing yourself of a wonderful experience. So don't be afraid to take those plots. Don't be afraid to take ownership of the lore. This is your world too. So don't be afraid to go in there.
I don't even need a summary. That last phrase, I think, is I agree. This is a pretty DM-centric topic, but I really think a big takeaway is to don't allow that to obfuscate as a player how much control you can have in how much or little of that lore you're engaging with and you're consuming.
Yeah.
And I think the more that you're tuned into that, the more you're going to get out of those sessions, the more you're going to drive your DM to go, oh, wow, they're following these hooks. They're picking up these breadcrumbs. I need to make bigger, better, cooler shit because I know it's not a waste of time.
Right.
So it's kind of you're rewarding your DM by rewarding yourselves.
Exactly.
Very symbiotic relationship.
Circle of life.
Ooh, look at that.
You're welcome.
I think on that note, that just about wraps up.
I think
lore.
so. I hope that answered Aurora's question.
Yeah, I hope so. First and foremost, as always, I would love to see some comments.
Please, and again, whether you have more questions about lore, if you want to have other questions, please let's get some conversations going.
And Aurora 101, drop it in the comments. Did we check your boxes? And if not, like I said, I think you've seen now how easy it is to reach out and tap us on the shoulder.
Let us know.
I'd love to chat some more. It's always a good time to chat D&D.
Absolutely.
So beyond that, if you guys are enjoying this and
you remember the bells, remember the likes, remember the subscribes, remember the tell your friends and neighbors. Remember that weird homeless guy on the side of the road? Yeah, did you tell him about Modern Myth? Because you need to.
Yep. When he takes off those clothes and you see a $1,000 suit underneath, and he's heading back home and jumping on his MacBook Pro,
making more money than I do.
He's got to jump in and no. We are actually on a big drive right now. We are trying to get to 100 subscribers by the launch of the actual play Rakish Rovers, which is less than a month away. I know that's a tall order, but we know you guys are awesome. We know you guys are going to come through.
We believe in you.
If you've been enjoying us via podcast, we love the follows. We love that you guys are so enjoying it there. If you are also a consumer of media via YouTube, maybe consider jumping over to our channel and slapping that sub. That way you can, there's actually a fair bit of our content that does not make it into the podcast sphere. You may find something over there that you like as much or more. Beyond that, I think we're just about wrapped up here today.
I think so, sir.
I think...
do you have one?
I don't have one outright. I was going to actually go back to an OG just to close it out, but if you got something...
No. I got nothing. What's the OG?
Oh, I was just... take us out, sir. We haven't just done a plain Jane.
All right. The world is yours.